So there's a fun way to make chords that I first learned around the time that I started playing guitar. When listening to people like Yngwie or Satriani or something, every now and again they'd play something that sounded easy enough for me to play, and then I'd rush to the internet for tabs. One of those songs that really stood out was Joe Satriani's If I Could Fly. I remember hearing the gorgeous strummed guitar intro and thinking, wow, there's got to be some alternate tunings or something going on here. Looking up the part though, I came across two chords that sounded complex but were surprisingly simple. One being like an F sharp minor 7 add 11, and the other being like a B major add 11. Both of these chords have their jazzier counterparts, but when played the way Satriani played them, it was like this wonderful marriage between the cool intricate voicings you'd hear in jazz and the classic strumming you'd hear in an Eagles song. Let's listen to the jazz voicing and then the Eagles strummed voicing back to back. Learning some pretty new chords would have already made for a good day, but I loved the way Satriani went about getting these chords, because it was a way that I could replicate and find plenty of new sounds despite being a beginner. If you'd asked me like, oh, play me all the inversions of that F sharp minor 7 add 11 and the B major add 11, I would not be able to. But it was almost like a little cheat code where I was like, I'll get to those chords as I progress at guitar, but for now I can play them this other way. If you like what you see here today, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I really appreciate it. And let's continue. These chords come about by sliding one shape up and down the fretboard and letting some other open strings ring. In this case, it's the bottom 4 strings of a bar chord. Here, I'm going to move the major shape around and see what kind of sounds we can get. When it comes to the minor chord though, at least for me, it would be a little difficult to play the bottom 4 strings of a minor bar chord and let the top 2 strings ring out without muting them. A way around this though is just to make the minor chord by default a minor 7 chord and then also not play the A string, just mute it. So here are some of the chords we get by moving that shape around. So as you already may be thinking, there's way more chords and shapes than just these two to move around and find new chords with. If you already have a bit of experience with the cage system or kind of understand what it's about, it's really going to help you out here. Let's experiment with position 1 or the C shape. Now in the cage system, as we move up the fretboard, say from C to D, we move everything up 2 frets, which means all our fretted notes move up 2 frets and the open strings now become fretted at the 2nd fret. We can still visualize the C chord as we move it up the neck, but we're just never going to fret any of the open strings. So if we move that C shape up 2 frets to where we'd find D major, now we have D major 9 add 4. You also could call this voicing singer-songwriter D, as it happens a lot in that genre, most famously in John Mayer's riff from Why Georgia. While it might not be necessary that you know this is exactly a D major 9 add 4, it would be helpful that you keep in mind what keys this chord works in. For instance, this chord would generally work in the keys of D or G, but if you tried to play it in the key of A, where there is a D major, but with a sharp 4, then you might turn some heads, and not in a good way. The same kind of thing goes for this chord, which is an F sharp 7 add 11. If the open string notes of a chord added something that was pretty but not necessarily specific, you could feasibly use it in a few keys. For example, an F sharp major 9, major triad with a 9 added, could be the 1, 4, or 5 chord of a key. In the case of the F sharp 7 add 11, the open strings are the dominant 7 and natural 11, which makes it a pretty specific chord. I know I'm using 11 and 4 interchangeably, just think of them as the same thing in different registers for now. So I could use this chord as the 5 chord in the key of B, 2 dominant in the key of E, but it's going to be tough to use it just anywhere a dominant would be used because it's very clear that there is no sharp 11 in it. For instance, I wouldn't use it as the tritone substitution for C7 going to F because there's no sharp 4 available, and I wouldn't use it as an altered chord because it just so clearly isn't. I had a lot of fun with this exercise when I was starting out and had limited fretboard knowledge, because at its most basic, you could see it as just fret random frets or random strings and then play the fretted ones with the open strings. When you find a sound you like, you just find the notes that make up that chord and then try to make some sense of it. So these kinds of voicings obviously lend themselves to acoustic or clean electric strumming, but if you have a good amount of clarity in your overdriven tone, they can work there too. I hope you experiment with this method for finding neat chords, and honestly, if you find any you like, please tab them out in the comments. So I'm going to play us out using some of those chords on a clean setting and on a distorted setting. Thanks very much for watching.